So this is Michelangelo, who is the Renaissance master. He is generally recorded as one of the finest sculptors in the Western tradition. Some would say greatest. So he is sculptor, architect, and painter. So this is his sculpture, David statue. And he is a rival of Leonardo da Vinci, and his name means Archangel Michael. So he began serious work as an artist at the age of 13, and he did not stop until 76 years later. So his equal may never be seen again. This is also his sculpture. Looks beautiful. So sculpture's materials include diverse materials such as marble, metal, ceramics, wood, glass, wax, ice, plastic, and fiber. And sculptors' method today still include chiseling, like the Michelangelo did, and curving, molding, assembling, and constructing, but inventive sculptors are finding new ways to create their art and new materials to make it with. So there are two basic types for displaying sculpture. Um, so like freestanding sculpture style and relief sculpture display style. So the freestanding sculpture is a three-dimensional approach, and the other style, relief sculpture, is specifically designed for viewing from one side. So let's see freestanding style first. So although some freestanding sculpture is not intended, most freestanding sculptures display for showing every point of view, like this. So this is a powerful and beautiful sculpture by Gian Bologna, who is a Flemish artist working in Florence, Italy, designed the rape of a Sabine at the request of Florence ruler Francisco de' Medici. The sculpture forms a kind of a spiral that draws a viewer around to view its many changing planes. So with each step, the viewer can discover expected details as the surfaces spiral upward. It recreates an ancient story about the foundation of Rome. Most of the early founders of Rome were male. For the city to grow, the Romans needed wives. So they solved this problem by inviting their neighbors, the civilians, to a festival during which the Romans seized the Sabine women and forced them to marry. So this story symbolized the ability of a small community to become the most powerful city in Italy. And with this dramatic sculpture, Francisco announced to the Florentines and their enemies that, like Rome, Florence had risen to become a force to be reckoned with. So now let's see relief style of sculpture. So there are two ways of relief in sculpture. One is bas relief and the other one is high relief. Can you find the differences between the bas relief and the high relief? What's the difference?
Both of them look like 3D a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But probably the shade.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So as you can see, one is, shallow and the other one is deeper, right? So in bas relief means low in French, the sculpture's marks are shallow. An example of this kind of a sculpted surface was found in the North Palace of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in the ancient city of Nineveh um, in Mesopotamia, where is current place in Iraq. And this high relief, the British sculptor Susan Durant chose to incise the surface more deeply for the figures closer to the viewer. So sculptural methods are either subtractive or additive. So in the subtractive processes, a sculptor uses a tool to curve, drill, and chisel, chip, whittle, or saw away unwanted material. In the additive processes of modeling, casting, or constructing, sculptors add material to make the final artwork. So we are going to see a few of these sculptural methods now. Looks familiar with this, right? So the most ancient works of art that still exist were made using subtractive method of sculpture. So most of these were made of stone and were worked by chipping, curving, sanding, and polishing. So one of the largest and the most famous sculptural portraits were executed using the subtractive method, carving on a mountain side in South Dakota. And the Mount Rushmore National Memorial was executed by John Borglum. And Borglum approached the task with great care and drive, changing the original idea of local figures to that of four presidents. And he spent 2 years looking for a mountain with the right stone characteristics to make the work a success. And most of the subtractive sculpting was done by skilled miners using dynamite placed strategically to remove large masses of stone. The choice of location and drilling practice were essential because once the stone was removed, it could not be replaced. And we're gonna see, let's see the modeling as an additive method. So modeling in clay and wax is an additive process. The artist builds up the work by adding material. Clay and wax are pliable enough for sculptors to model them with their hands. So large sculptures like this ancient coffin sculpture are built from multiple pieces fired individually. So we can see here, assemblage line in the middle of the sculpture. So for this sculpture, four separate baked clay pieces make up this coffin sculpture. And here's another additive method, casting. Casting involves adding a liquid or pliable material to a mold. Um, it is done in in order to set a form in a more durable material or to make it possible to create multiple copies of a work. So here is the work process. So the first step in casting is to make a model as the final sculpture. So this is used to make a mold.
I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
It's
but
okay.
was this information on the test?
Can you say again?
Was this information on the test?
This is casting.
No, was it on the test?
The test?
Was it on the midterm that we just took?
The midterm?
Yes. Was this information that we learned, and was it on the midterm?
No, it was not for the midterm. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just looked familiar. It was like a picture like this that I remember.
Oh, really? Maybe it was, the printing process, I guess. So, let's see. So this is used to make a mold, and then casting liquid is often molten metal, but other material such as clay, plaster, acrylic, polymers, or glass are used. And and it is poured into the mold, and when it hardens, the result is a detailed replica of the original model. So let me share a video how to make this casting sculpture.
The first step in this process is to insert metal shims into the sculpture. The shims are meant to divide the sculpture into two sections. In this case,
so this is the final work, and you're gonna make a replica of this.
Next, we have to mix some plaster, and to make plaster, we add the gypsum powder to water, roughly at a ratio of 1:1. But the best way to mix plaster is to use your eyes and to add powder to water until it just barely sits on the surface of the water. And then you simply stir the lumps out of the plaster so it's a nice smooth consistency.
So he's using the plaster as a mold.
At this point, we want to apply the face coat of plaster to the first half of the sculpture using a brush. We want to use a brush here to make sure that the plaster gets down into every little nook and cranny of the clay, and it wants to be a nice thin consistency so that any air bubbles can escape from the plaster. And then we want to take a spatula with a mixture of plaster that's further along in the process of setting up so that you can add it to the edge of the mold using your spatula. Then we want to add one more coat of plaster to the rest of the mold so that it's about 3 layers thick. The idea here is to have a relatively thin mold with a thicker section where the shims are. This gives the mold some strength and durability. At this point, you can remove the shims, sliding them out carefully so that you don't affect the original clay sculpture. You want to carve out some registration holes with a sharp tool, a knife or a chisel, so that the two halves of the mold will lock into place nicely when they're put back together. Here I'm painting on a clay slip to the shim line of the mold. This clay slip is just diluted clay or clay that's been mixed with water. Once the slip is applied, then we can mix up another batch of plaster and start to brush it on the sculpture, making sure we get plaster into all of the crevices of the sculpture and making sure that we put plaster on the shim edge. After the first face coat, we can then add another coat of thin plaster to the mold. both sides of the mold have 3 coats of plaster, then it's time to add some supports that will give the mold a little bit more structure, a little bit more strength when it's time to pull the mold apart and then pour the plaster in the mold. These are just 2 pieces of hollow metal rod that I'm applying to the mold using burlap dipped in the plaster and then rolled up and then stuck onto the surface of the mold. Once the plaster has sufficiently set on both sides, then it's time to crack open the mold. At first, you should chisel very lightly until the seam line fractures just slightly. At this point, I like to stick butter knives in the crack and wiggle them a little bit to loosen the 2 halves of the mold. The type of mold we're making here is a waste mold, which means not only is the mold wasted after one cast, but also the sculpture is often wasted in the process of pulling apart this mold. You can see here that my sculpture is essentially tearing into 2 halves, but this is okay if we've made a good mold because the sculpture is captured in the mold in the negative.
See, he just created the mold, and he's gonna pour some material in it to make
Once
a copy
you've
of
cleaned
it.
out as much of the clay as you can, you want to then soak the sculpture in water. Once you've soaked the mold, you want to then pour some Murphy's oil soap into the mold, and then using a large brush, you want to swirl the brush around, creating a froth that covers the whole surface of the mold. You want to soak each half of the mold 3 times, rinsing the mold in between each application of the soap. And this will assure that the plaster mold will fall off of the plaster cast very easily. At this point, we can rejoin the 2 halves of the mold and then secure them together using burlap dipped in plaster and then rolled up and tacked onto the surface. Now we want to seal the seam all the way around with dollops of plaster to ensure that no plaster will leak out of the mold when we pour it in. Once the plaster that is joining the 2 halves of the mold together is fully set, then we can turn the mold upside down. At this point, we want to mix up a couple of buckets of plaster, enough to fill the entire mold. At first, it's best to pour enough plaster to fill only about 1/3 of the mold and then slosh it around to make sure that the plaster gets into all of the crevices of the mold. Then we can add more plaster, filling the mold almost all the way to the top. Shaking the mold is a way to make sure that air bubbles can escape from the plaster. Once you feel like you've got most of the air bubbles out, then you can tap it with a hammer, again, trying to get out as many of the air bubbles that would be on the surface of the cast as possible. At this point, it's best to wait at least an hour to make sure that the poured plaster is sufficiently set inside the mold. Then we can begin to remove the supports, including the supports that hold the 2 halves of the mold together, and also chiseling away the seam of plaster that was covering the crack of the 2 halves. Once all the supports are removed, then it's time to crack open the 2 halves of the mold. Again, I start at the top of the mold, and I tap lightly at first, trying to open that small seam again.
So now,
Once all of the large pieces,
he just made a copy with the different material of the original. So that is the additive process casting. So So we just saw the traditional sculpture process, like this. So used for sculpting were ideal for the creation of static objects, but artists. And in modern, there are diverse types of sculpture we can see, such as artwork, construction, assemblage, ready-made, kinetic and light sculpture, and installation. So let's see each of the innovative sculpture style. So this is earthwork. So can you guess what's the material for this sculpture? What's the medium of this sculpture, everyone?
Like rocks.
Yes, yes. So the artist is using now the material from the earth, from the nature. So that's why it is called earthwork. So prehistory artists of the Americas and monumental sculptures that used the surface of the earth itself as material. So this was additive sculpture on a very large scale, and the best known modern earthwork is this Robert Smith's spiral jetty in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. So Smithson chose a spiral and shape naturally found in shells, crystals, and even galaxies. And the coiled artwork was made by dumping 6,550 tons of rock and dirt of dump trucks, gradually paving a spiraling roadbed out into the Salt Lake. And the next innovative sculpture style is construction. So the idea of constructing sculptures is relatively new. Methods for doing so have proliferated with the growth of standardized engineered materials such as sheets, metals, and plastics. In the late 19th century, sculptors began to look beyond the traditional curved or cast forms to the process of constructing. So this is British artist Damien Hirst's work, and he made his work the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. So out of a large tank full of formaldehyde in which he suspended a dead shark. And of course, not every part of his work was constructed. Hirst had the shark caught by fishermen. This is a real shark. And the entire work resembles a dissection specimen in a biology class. So Hirst is known for creating his sculptures from unusual objects that contrast life and death. And the next new sculpture style is assemblage. The practice of gathering objects and fabricating them into a work of art is called assemblage. The gathered objects, sometimes called found objects, are repurposed so that they support the visual ideas and compositions of the artist. Yes, and the next one is ready-made. So looks familiar with this, right? So in the early 20th century, a few artists began to create works using raw materials, artifacts that already existed. So sometimes they simply decided that found objects were works of art. So this is Pablo Picasso's ready-made work. Can you guess what he made?
A bullhead.
Yeah, a bowl head. And can you guess what's the material?
It's like an iron.
It seems like leather, Professor.
Yeah,
Seems like leather.
leather.
It's
Yeah,
like
there.
iron.
This is a leather. Can you guess what it is?
A bicycle seat.
Yes, there we go. It's a bicycle seat, and this is a bicycle's handlebar. So he took the handlebars and the seat of a bicycle and combined them to make a bull's head. Such artworks are known as ready-made. You know, we learned that and we saw this in the midterm. Also, we learned this ready-made. We saw the same work in the midterm, Marshall Disham's fountain. The male's urinal is the same work style. And the next one is kinetic and light sculpture. What's the meaning of kinetic art, everyone? Do you remember what it is? Kinetic?
Yes,
Yes, what it is?
when they move.
Yes, very good. So kinetic means any work of art related to the movement. Yes. So technological advances in our society have created more opportunities for creativity. So sculptors who work with movement and light express their ideas in ways that would not have been possible just a century or two before. So these moving and lighted sculptural works, similar to those of the constructivist, relying on mechanical engineering as well as the creative input of the artist. So sculptures that moves is called kinetic sculpture. So, and now let's see installation. So modern artists have explored many ways of expanding the range of sculpture as a medium. An installation sculpture involves the construction of a space or assembly of objects to create an environment. So we are encouraged to experience the work physically using all our sense, perhaps entering the work itself like this. So these are all new types of sculpture method. So now we recognize there are lots of sculptures in diverse ways around us. So I hope you understand the flow of the sculpture in art through this chapter. And we have a discussion related to this chapter today. So this is our first activity. So here is the topic. So what is the difference between the traditional sculpture, like casting, or carving, and on installations? So as the viewer, which one do you prefer and why? So please answer this discussion topic by tonight. And now we're gonna have a break for 15 minutes. Do you have any question about this discussion? No?
So this is the only one that's due for tonight.
No, we have one more thing after. I will let you know after the break.
Okay.
Okay. And if you have any question about your midterm, please ask me after the meeting. So, all right, and let's take a break. All right. So do you like taking a picture? No one like it?
I do.
You do?
I don't have a professional camera yet, but I have like it's called like an Insta Snacks camera.
Yeah.
Where it comes out like soon as you take it in the pictures, it's like mini.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, my mom also bought me like a portable printer. So
Uh-huh.
every picture I take like on my phone, I can like, but I love pictures. I love taking pictures, capture some good memories.
I love it too. You know, I have a professional camera like this, but you know, this, you know, the smartphone's camera, the iPhone's camera is so good. So, you know, I don't use that much, you know. So, so we are so familiar with the camera and the photography now. Everyone, you know, can take a picture anywhere we want. So, camera and you know, computer technology is essential to business, advertising, um, education, government, mass media, and entertainment nowadays. So it has commercial application and personal applications. Among these individuals are artists who have carved out a space for human expression within the vast flow of information and images that the camera and the computer have enabled. So today we're going to see a brief photography history with the camera's development. So the earliest written record that has come down to us of the principle behind photography is from Chinese philosopher named Mo Tai, who lived in during the 5th century BCE. And Mo Tai noticed that light passing through a pinhole like this. There is a pinhole, and this is a dark chamber room. And the light passing through a pinhole opening into a darkened chamber would from an exact view of the world outside, but upside down. So a century or so later, the Greek philosopher Aristotle observed a similar phenomena and wondered what caused them. And early in the 11th century, the Arab mathematician and physicist Alhazen set up an experiment in a dark room in which light from several candles passed through a pinhole in a partition, projecting images of the candle frames onto a surface on the other side. So Alhazen's works circulated in translation in Europe, where early scientists continued his investigations into the behavior of light. But it was not until Renaissance that a practical device was developed to harness those principles. So it was known as the camera obscura, Latin for darkness. So with the development of lenses during the 16th century, about the Renaissance era, the camera obscura could be made to focus the image it projected. So artists of the time concerned with making optically convincing representations through perspective and chiaroscuro welcomed this improved camera obscura as a drawing tool. So I'm gonna share a video to show you how to make the camera obscura.
Camera obscura. A camera obscura, also known as a pinhole camera, is the concept concept that made modern-day photography possible. Now use the same principle to turn a whole room into a walk-in camera. You will need a room with one window, 3 or more 28 by 22-inch sheets of black poster board, a flashlight, a utility knife, and duct tape. Optional, a white sheet, a blanket, and a camera with exposure settings. Step 1. Find a room that has a window with a decent view. Look for a blank wall opposite the window since that's where the picture will be projected. If it's not blank, hang a white sheet on the wall. Step 2. Unscrew the ring from the top of the flashlight and remove the lens. Place the ring in the middle of the sheet of poster board and cut a hole around it. Then, tape the ring to the cardboard with duct tape. This will be the lens for the camera obscura. Step 3. Tape the remaining poster board over the window, overlapping if necessary. Leave an area uncovered in the middle of the window for the lens. Step 4. Tape the lens backing to the window with duct tape. The window should now be completely covered, and aside from the lens hole, there should be no light passing through. Step 5. Turn off all lights in the room and close the door so that the only light entering the room is from the camera lens. After a few minutes, your eyes will adjust to the dark and an image should appear on the wall.
Like this. Isn't it amazing? So that is camera obscura. So this is the the modern professional camera, the DSLR camera. But despite the sophistication of modern photographic equipment, the basic mechanism of the camera is simple, and it is no different in theory from that of the camera obscura we just saw. So there are 2 mirrors in the modern camera like this. So the light goes through the lens and it reflects on the first mirror, and then it goes to the second mirror, and if it reflects on the opposite side of the window, we see like this. So we can see the object not upside down. So now let's see the beginning of the camera. So there is a French inventor, Niepce. So based on the camera obscura, so this guy worked to make the modern camera. So he worked with a specially coated pure plate in the camera obscura. In 1826, Niepce recorded a fuzzy version of the view from his window after an exposure of 8 hours. And there is another inventor who worked with making a modern camera as well. So his name is Daguerre. So he was also experimenting with methods to fix the photographic image, and these 2 men worked separately and communicated in code to keep their progress from prying eyes. However, in 1839, Daguerre made the breakthrough, recording in his studio an image that was clear and sharp by method that others could duplicate easily. So this is the camera he made. So Daguerre's light-sensitive surface was copper plate coated with silver iodide, and he named his invention the Daguerre type. So see, this is his breakthrough photograph. This is the first photograph in the world. It looks very clear and sharp. So Daguerre made this image illustrated here in 1839, and the year the French government announced his discovery to the world. Yet for all its early success, the daguerreotype was ultimately a blind delay for photography. And the process produces a positive image like this, an image in which light and dark values appear correctly. So the image is unique and cannot be reproduced. So the plate is the photograph. So the future of photography instead lay in technology that produced a negative image like this, one in which light and dark values were reversed. So this negative could be used again and again to create several positive images on light-sensitive paper. So photography found its essence as an art of potentially unlimited low-cost multiples. So early photography required long exposure times, like I said, 8 hours, and the bulky equipment we just saw. So this meant that photographers could not yet capture action. So the renowned civil photographer um, Timothy Sullivan created images that have become part of the American cultural identity, yet non-pictures are a battle underway.
Professor,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sorry. Does picture have you ever watched hotel the movie Hotel Rwanda?
So this is American photographers photography during the Civil War. Now, as you can see, he just took a photograph after the battle
Yeah,
because
that's what I say. It kind of remind me of the movie Hotel Rwanda. That's how horrible it is.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah, because the old camera has is very heavy and it requires a long exposure time. So all the photographers have to wait something is done to take a photograph. And this cumbersome progress had changed by the 1880s when technical advances reduced exposure time to a fraction of a second, allowing cameras to capture life. And it happened without asking it to pose. So then in 1888, an American named George Eastman developed a camera, the Kodak, which changed photography forever. Have you ever heard about the Kodak camera before? Have you ever used it before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard of Kodak camera. They don't
Yes.
sell a lot of, I don't think it's that popular. A lot of
Uh-huh.
people use like Canon and other brands now, but
Yes. Yes, exactly. So before the digital camera, the Kodak camera was so popular with the film, right? It's just original camera type. So unlike earlier camera, the Kodak was lightweight and handheld, which meant it could be taken anywhere. So the camera came loaded with the new invention, a roll of film, this, enough for 100 photographs. So the Kodak and cameras like it opened photography up to amateurs, and it quickly became a popular hobby. So from the beginning, there were photographers and critics who insisted that photography could also be um, practiced as an art. So today, photography is fully integrated into the art world of museums and galleries. And many artists who are not primarily photographers work with photographic images. So there are two great female photographer videos in the Moodle Room page. So please watch them after the class so you can see how contemporary photographers convey their message through their photographs. So I hope you enjoyed that artist video. So let me show you where is the videos. So it's in 8.2 page here. When you access to the week 8.2 photograph page, and please scroll down and you will see two artist video link. One is Sherwin Neshat and the other one is Zhang Jin Li. So please watch this video after the class. And we have a sketchbook project related to this chapter, photography. I guess you're gonna like it. So the fourth sketchbook project is photography, everyone. So for this photography project, as you expected, you will need a smartphone or digital camera or any cameras you have. After taking a picture, then you will post your photo in week 8.2 sketchbook process forum of the Moodle Room. Then now let's see what kind of a picture we are going to take today. So here is the theme of the project. So take a photo which shows your identity, personality, and characteristics in a representational or non-representational way. So it can be black and white, or it can be color, or it can be abstract, or it can be figurative. So just to choose any style, theme, or objects which represent yourself.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the picture, can you like take pictures and can you make a collage with the pictures?
Oh, you can do that. You can use the collage technique, or you can just take a one decent photo. It doesn't matter. Yep,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. So post your photograph with a short description as usual, and tell us why you think it represents yourself. It's very simple. And the taking a photo doesn't take that long. So I need you to post the photograph today, not just the description or plans. And now let me share my photograph work. So this is one of my photograph work. And I always dream if I were born again, I would be a bird. So I could be free to go anywhere. And I also wish I could be living in the nature, so any civilized things could not bother me. So that describes myself. I'm a person who would be free to travel and loves nature. So I mixed those two things in this photograph with the photo editing programs, but you don't need to use it,
I was just about to ask. So, did you create this, or is it a picture of something?
I took these bird pictures and some water texture photo and some branches photos, and then I overlapping in a photo editing programs.
Okay, so what we taking a picture of is a single item, like something
Yes.
that represents us. Okay.
Yes. So now let me
Yes.
share
I like
let me
it.
share more examples. So some of the example might not be exactly related to the main topic of this project, but you can just get some inspiration to take a creative photograph. So this is a self photograph by photo montage technique, Janasia, asked me. So you can use a photo editing app or program if you can use it, or you can print two photos and cut one of the photos and glue it. So like a photo montage collage to create this effect. And you can just access a conceptual theme for this project, and you don't need to include yourself to show who you are in your photograph. And you can just take a picture of an object like this, which is related to yourself. Okay. So the project due is by tonight. And
So, Professor,
mhm.
this project and the other question, they both are due tonight by 11:55, correct?
Oh, yes. Yes,
All right.
11:55. Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And you can create very interesting effect like this photo. An interesting point in this photograph, I think, is the saturation and the colors point. So this girl's dress has only vivid color here, and the lake and the forest are black and white. Also, the foreground is brown with very low saturation. So the low saturation of subordination make this girl as a focal point. And you can create the powerful photograph by using a dramatic concept like this work of art. And then, or you can take a picture, a place where it's meaningful to you. Or you can make a story in your photograph like this. Or you can make something fun like this photograph. So it doesn't need to be very serious. If you like something simple and fun, then you can just find the easiest way for this project, because it is also showing yourself. And wow, yes. And this photo, tell us a strong message, a mother. So you can show a message through your photograph like this, but it must be also talking about yourself. And you can show a sense of humor like this photo. I guess this photo is very rhythmical. And it can be grotesque if it is related to yourself. Then you can do it like this. And if you need, you can add a simple drawing on your photograph. And you can choose a theme and a simple object to show yourself like this. Also, you can use a silhouette. So that's it. So don't think it complicated. No, think it easy and make it simple. And art is a visual language. So through this project, think about yourself and tell us who you are in a visual language. So let me show you where you can find this project. So it's here in 8.2. So please post your photograph in Sketchbook 8.2 forum. So you will see here by tonight. And by tomorrow, please reply to your peers to get the full participation point. Also, don't forget the first discussion, about the sculpture and the installation. So we have two activities today again. One is discussion 8.1, the other one is a sketchbook 8.2. And you can see the examples here, sketchbook 8.2 photograph, this, PDF file. I just posted the same file we just shared. So